I feel like if we had done this a week ago, it would have been a lot different opinions on it. The previous build, Arcane was just so incredibly fucked.
Right. I have a weird question. Can you actually spec out of hero talents?
Right now, yes.
Okay. Because I know we've seen systems in the past where, like, once you're, like, spec'd into it, like, you can change your hero build, but, like, you can't actually, like, right-click it and then, like, apply a talent build. I'm trying to think that, like, Covenants work like that. Something works like that.
The current talent system works like that. You can't build a talent tree without using every point that you have available in the spec or class tree. So presumptuously they'll fix hero talents to not allow you to spec out of them, but right now you can.
It was the Giga Brain I want to parse on beta thing for Fire for a couple weeks there, where people were talenting out of Codex because it was like a 10% DPS gain.
It's just awful. Right, so today you're saying Splinter Storm is a DPS loss?
Depending on the length of the fight, yeah. So the longer the fight goes, the better talenting out of Splinter Storm is. It's about neutral at like 3 to 4 minutes, and then at 5 minutes it's pretty solidly ahead, and at 10 minutes it's like 10% ahead.
It's just to stack the dot, yeah.
Yeah. The dot stacks up. So the dot used to only stack to 40 per target, and for some reason, in the process of fixing the bug with Splinter Storm activating every 2 splinters or whatever, they increased the dot cap to 250. So now you can get like a 500k dot that can crit up on a single target. It's pretty ridiculous.
And I think Nori was triggering it by not having an actual target, so he was talented into it still, but it requires a legitimate target to proc the storm itself. So doing a focus macro or a target or mouse over or whatever, you could build up that whole thing and never proc the Splinter Storm until you actually target the mob.
Yeah, which is really good because like you could go into a 10-minute fight, right? You hit the last phase of Raz and you're like, all right, click boss, 250 splinters fire off on it, you know?
Yeah,
and pair that with the spider trinket real quick.
The Spy Master.
Open beta. Keep forgetting that just wasn't an option for so many of these that just not used to doing it. We're within beta. I don't have it installed. Okay, we're still using Wowhead. I nuked all my WoW installations. Have any of you been raid testing?
Yeah, I've been.
Go ahead.
I would say I've been raid testing with Porum. So far, the raid is looking really, really nice. There's a couple bosses that I can already tell are going to be a pain, like the Silken Council. Is that what they call it? The penultimate.
Tripwire.
It's going to be chaos on Mythic. The new Zymox portal boss is looking to be my favorite. I think you got to take 5 different portals and space them out so you don't get sucked. It's really cool.
I think they changed that boss a little bit. I know they retested him like a week ago. I didn't do the new testing though, so I'm not sure what they changed.
Yeah,
no, I was on vacation all week.
I might be in the minority, but I've been doing raid testing for maybe like 6 years now. I don't think I've ever learned anything from raid testing, so I just stopped. It's always an excuse like, how broken is my class right now? Okay, here's something that's a bit more than a target dummy. Let's find out.
I think the biggest pain in the butt with raid testing is like there's always a million healers for some reason and never any DPS. So we always end up in groups where like half the healers are pissed off because they have to go DPS back and they're not they're just complaining the whole time.
Yeah, that's because healers have the biggest percentage of degen tryhards of the 3 roles.
Pretty much.
I don't know. My favorite thing is seeing people going in there with like their sigils or like their old scaled up gear. Like how busted can I make my class? Got to get those nerfs in early.
Yeah. Okay. On Arcane, is there anywhere you want to start past Splinterstorm being a DPS loss?
No, I think the hero trees haven't really changed much since the last time we talked. I'm not sure if we talked about like Burden of Power and Spellfrost teaching. Those got tuned down a bit. So Burden of Power, now you can't double dip on it with queuing Barrage anymore. So there's a bit of a kind of boring element to it, and they made Burden of Power proc Glorious Incandescence now works off of Barrage instead of Orb. So there's no like friction between your cooldowns and how you interact with the hero tree. They changed that a couple weeks ago, so I'm pretty sure we didn't touch on it, but that's kind of different now and a little bit worse in my opinion. Splintering's all pretty much the same, and then the rest is really in the SPEC tree, which they've added like a ton of new talents. Some of them are cool, some of them are pretty just boring percentage damage. And then they pruned out some of the boring percentage damage talents that we had before, like Crackling and improved arcane missiles. I think that's kind of a good summary for where things are at.
Yeah, so when we're talking like the Arcane rework, we've had like 2 different iterations of it. If you looked at it last week, the tree was about 15 feet wide, and it was just filled with all these 5% increased damage, 2% increased proc, just really, really boring stuff. They came back this week, and they actually pruned a lot of that out. It made it a lot more of a linear tree. But they also took some things that we kind of wanted to keep, such as Chrono Shift. It's completely been removed.
Yeah, I mean,
I think
Chrono Shift hasn't been good in a long time, right? I know.
Well,
like,
to be fair,
good,
it's always been good. It's a pure like luxury quality of life talent versus throughput in the current Dragonflight tree, right? Like in Shadowlands, BFA, Legion, we took Chrono Shift every time because it was up against like Ring of Frost and Double Ice Frost Nova, I think. So like it was a really easy quality of life point to justify. But in Dragonflight, it's up against like 2% single target, 3% AoE, and you're just like, do I need to run faster? do I need to slow everything 50%? Probably not.
It always as long as it was trigger on impact, I was like, this. I've stopped moving by the time my barrage is hit.
It hasn't seen a lot of use in like the PvE scene because there is that tax. PvPers, it's the only reason Arcane's been used. I know transmog farmers, including myself, have abused it for years. I used it a lot for the Mage Tower. I did a naked run for the Mage Tower, and I used Chrono Shift to kite them around. It's just such a fun little talent. I'm sad it's gone.
Yeah, it was really nice in Mop Remix too. Like all the builds that I suggested there were on it because you're just like transmog run, right? You know, just running through shit. But I think PvP is the biggest impact for that, and I think they are rightfully extremely upset about the loss of Chrono Shift because it's, you know, Arcane has a single spell school, so it's just a bit more challenging now to justify picking it over Frost and Fire.
I even used Chrono Shift a bit when I was running Arcane Dungeons, just because I don't care about a 1% throughput in a key, so I pick up Chrono Shift so I could run around like an idiot.
Yeah, it's worth noting. Like I suggested it for the Wowhead guide. I suggested it for all the dungeon builds in season 2, because it was up against 1% talents. You know what I mean? It was really easy to justify that. In season 3, I didn't because improved clear casting's worth quite a bit more with the 4-piece bonus. But overall, like Chrono Shift is that thing that you really want to justify the point for, but just can't always feasibly do it. And a lot of it's because of what you said, Toe, right? Because the speed increase doesn't happen till it lands. in single target, you like never benefit from that pretty much.
Yeah. So what I was about to say, like in keys, you're barraging and then moving, and then you have like quite high uptime on the buff, whereas like in single target, you barrage, move, and then like stop, and then the barrage will hit, and then you'll get your speed buff. Because if you're like min-maxing globals, you'll stop, and then it's like, well, this thing's not very useful. So I don't think we talked about. God, I think it's been a while since we've talked about Arcane. The Palm Slipstream locations. I think they were like. I think we suggested this, right? But like they were out somewhere else last time we talked about Arcane, weren't they?
So Slipstream's pretty much where it was, but Palm was leading up to Siphon Storm down the left side of the tree, right? Siphon Storm they baked into Evo now, and it's just in the center of the tree, really easy to get. And now, like you said, it's Presence of Mind versus Slipstream kind of. One of the interesting things about this choice actually is so doing the pre-patch sims and the Splinter sims, Presence of Mind is actually a DPS loss now to use at the end of touch. And part of the reason of that is because if you don't have Nether Precision, it doesn't really do much. And then the other part of that is you really want to queue Barrage off of Arcane Blast when you have Nether Precision for the extra splinters and Nether Precision double dipping. So like Presence of Mind isn't really useful for anything but mobility now.
Surely even with two charges it's fine, because you go like into your Magi Spark, you would go like Missiles doesn't consume, then Barrage or like Blast Barrage even with Palm.
You have to cancel Aura is what I have the APL doing right now. So what the APL is doing is it uses the first Palm Blast to finish touch, and then it just cancel Auras the second one immediately so that it doesn't mess up any queuing you try to do later. Yeah. And that way it's also up for every touch window too, right? Because the APL is a little bit better than we would be, right? And it's canceling that immediately, so it's not skipping any beats with the with how that works. So I might end up adding some kind of delay there to simulate like a player actually being like, all right, my blast went off and now I'm canceling. You know what I mean?
Yeah, you have an entire global. Should be like realistic enough, right?
I think so, yeah. And generally speaking, your surge windows are always offset 2 seconds because of Surge's cast time. So, like, realistically, you should have Palm up for every touch window, even with a delay in cancel-oring.
I think when we were previously talking about this pathing, we had suggested, like, putting Slipstream against Chrono Shift leading into that Touch of the Magi. And I still think that would be the better choice. I think Palm is, from a utility standpoint, something that could be baselined. I think Chrono Shift and Slipstream are both, like, individually too strong to just be baselined. But Palm is just, like, kind of classic Arcane flavor, not really that strong, just nice utility. So I wouldn't mind them walking that back, baseline Presence of Mind, and putting Chrono Shift back in that point. One nice thing that they did do from last week's build to this week's build is Surging Urge, which is the 5% increase damage to your Surge, no longer leads into Touch of the Magi. So you're not like making that choice against like Slipstream or something, because you can't really utilize that pathing. So it makes that talent a lot less mandatory.
Yeah, that's what that's what I was referring to when I was saying about our suggestions, because like previously here, you had that like throughput versus.
I think it used to be Mana Adept was there.
Yeah, but you also had this line in the middle as well.
Yeah.
So, like,
it's worth noting too. Surging Urge is like hard bad. It is that 100%. No one's gonna pick this in any content at all. It is atrociously bad. Even mastery stacking and Prodigious Savant affects it, which is another interesting interaction there. But even with that and like hard mastery stacking, it's like a less than 1% talent, and there's just better options in the tree now.
Yeah, it is one of those talents where it's like, right, I don't want a Feely Craft, but I'm pretty sure this is terrible.
Yeah.
Is Savant a 2-pointer or 1-pointer?
Yeah.
2-pointer, okay.
It's 20% per point, yeah.
I was wondering
So
if it
Arcane
fixed the
ended.
symmetricalness of like the 1 and 2-pointers or not. Because the Bowhead Tree, I think, was wrong.
Yeah, it's fully symmetrical tree now.
Yeah, okay.
And then there's just the one choice node that isn't really a choice with Magi Spark and Nether Munitions. That's another one. Magi Spark is like 5 to 8% ahead in every situation, even mass AoE. So it's just munitions is dead on arrival.
So I actually had a question for that Porum. Reading the tooltip, does it increase the damage of the entire arcane missile or just the first missile that hits it?
They whitelisted the missile itself, and so it's just the first missile echoes, and that's it.
Okay.
One of the only cool thing about Magi Spark is you do want to use the Arcane Blast even up to 20 targets. So it's like you'll always want to fit in a blast there at least. So it has some rotational oddity to it that I didn't think it would actually have.
I had like all these cooks floating in my head, like how can we get the 4-piece missile proc into the Magi Spark, and it's going to amp the whole thing. It's going to be huge, and it's just going to do one little beep. That's so crap.
Yeah, I actually I played around too with like just sending your missile and barrage pre-pull or pre-totem, right, and having the missile and barrage be before the cast, right, because they both snapshot on damage, right. It just kind of gets it out of the way. It's funky. What was that, Toe?
I was going to say I wonder how they'd implement that, because like whenever they have like Arcane Missiles buffs, they like hack it where like you just keep the buff until the Arcane Missiles is done. But it was like if it's a debuff on the target, like how's that work? It turns out it just doesn't. So I guess that's how they got rid of it.
Which is consistent with how it worked with Radiant Spark and Harmonic Echo too, right? Like they're not building these spells right for missiles.
Radiant Spark's a bit different, I guess. If you're a player and you read a thing like increases the damage of your next Arcane Missiles, like the Radiant Spark one's intuitive. You're like, all right, okay, it consumes all 4. That makes sense. Whereas if you're like Arcane Missiles go, and then it like buffs the first missile, and then the rest of them just go. It's a little bit different, a little bit more nonsense.
At least with like Radiant Spark, you saw like stacking up rapidly and going poop. With this, you don't even get that.
Yeah. There's no indication that it failed.
Yeah. Did you say your damage numbers turned off?
Yeah.
Yeah. Goat gang. I haven't seen a damage number in years at this point.
So some of the things I would probably change looking at this build, I think this might be the one that similar to what I linked in Alter Time or whatever for like starter build. Some of the things I found is like Energized Familiar, way stronger than I imagined. The extra attacks during your surge touch window actually pay off, and it's like a solid 2 to 3% talent pretty much in any content too, because of the Arcane Echo damage increasing in AoE. And then Energy Reconstitution, the one that Dematerialize leads into in Gate 2, above Prodigious Savant. It's like a random arcane explosion. This one is really, really good too. Like 3-4% talent in pretty much all content, which is just surprising stuff because it's like kind of lackluster and using it you don't really feel anything from it.
So this is like the Nether Precision Dot has a chance to proc an Arcane Explosion.
Well, yeah, exactly.
Yeah, okay.
Nether Precision applies a dot with Dematerialize, and then that has a chance to explode.
Yeah, so this is if you've heard of these spells called Ignite and Conflagration, that's this, but now they're purple. So you have Arcane Ignite and then Arcane Conflag.
Well,
yeah.
That'll go very nicely with my Arcane Comet Storm and my Arcane Icicles.
And then you've got a Static Cloud above dematerialize, which is new as well now. And that one rotates a buff that Arcane Explosion just does a ton more damage. That increments and benefits from energy reconstitution, which is also pretty damn nice.
There's also a really fun bug with the Static Cloud right now. So it starts off, when you first sound into it, you have 0%. You press it once, 25, 50, 75, 100. Then it resets back to 25. That buff has a 60-second timer. So you can spec into it, stack it up to 4 real quick, get 100%, talent out of it, and keep that 60-second buff at 100%.
But it's on explosion, so it doesn't do that.
Yeah.
I know there's going to be a raid fight where like the parse fiends in the raid like insist like let me stack this before every pull. And no, what's the boss? Like one Sandy in BFA that had like ads on pull that you like killed on pull. It's like but like it's a single target fight. You know, like some kind of fight like that. And it's like, guys, I need to stack this Arcane Explosion thing before we pull.
Maybe the Broodkeeper fight.
Okay.
There's a new Broodkeeper fight that's just ads constantly. Might be worth doing.
Oh, but I'm thinking like fights where there's ads on pull and then not again. Where you want to play like a single target build, but the Parse Fiend in your raid will insist on stacking this before pulling it. Yeah. So they've changed the capstones as well since we last looked at this, but I'm trying to think of what state they were in the last time.
The last time, they were in a similar state, I think, right? Except Siphon Storm was added in, or did the last time we talked was before High Voltage, huh?
I think it was before High Voltage.
Okay. High Voltage has changed a ton. It's made the rotation a lot simpler in some ways. So now, instead of using those low charge blasts or having that friction between how you use your charges, right? You can avoid a lot of that friction by just skipping the low charge blast and firing off a missile instead and getting charges that way. It's definitely an interesting talent, especially in AoE. It gives like missiles maybe too good of a spot in AoE. Currently, the APL with it is just using missiles for every clear casting and explosion when you don't have clear casting.
Is it right to say, reading this, that you probably get a charge on every Arcane Missiles?
Roughly, yeah.
Yeah.
There's a chance you get 0 and a small chance you get 2 or 3, but for the most part, you'll get 1 pretty much every cast.
You can low roll it, but compared to last week when they first implemented it, people were getting 4 stacks from almost every missile, and people were like, "This is the best." They fixed that, so now it's a little bit more controlled.
Nice. And then on Arcane Harmony, since we have just while we're on the side of the tree, am I right in saying that like AoE missile stacks Harmony?
Yeah.
Like extra, yeah.
It also benefits from what's it called? High Voltage. So like you get a lot more charges from AoE missiles, and Arcane Debilitation, the talent that leads into AoE missiles, that stacks on every target hit by missiles.
Right, and then the other capstones are the same, with the exception of Evocation having moved. Was it in the place of Resonant Orbs before? Somewhere around there?
It was just above that, or just below that, rather, where Arcane Debilitation. So it was a capstone before, right?
Yeah.
Siphon was, but it was higher, lower down. Yeah.
Okay.
I think that's it. Yeah.
Okay. Current issues, or what would you change about current Arcane before I'm doing a start?
I think the tree comparatively to Dragonflight is now in a much more comparable state. You can get a Mythic Plus build that does really good single target and really good AoE without having to make major sacrifices in one or the other. If you want to fully optimize for one or the other, obviously there's going to be, stiffer sacrifices made. That was probably my biggest complaint about the rework thus far, and so I'm glad to see that has been mostly addressed. The problem with how that was addressed is there are talents that are hard locked in that we are never going to talent out of, especially in the capstone category. Magi Spark, Harmony, Aether, those 3 points that require you to take the 4 points above it, those are hard locked in. Those 7 points will never change for anything, I'm pretty sure, in the current state. And we didn't really have a whole lot of flexibility before, so it's not really a new problem. But before, it was because all of our capstones were really weak. Now all of our capstones are really strong, and so most of them are locked in place. I think overall I'm happy with what we have. The biggest complaint beyond how locked in the capstones are, I think Gate 1 and 2 still have that disregard for quality of life that we've seen in a couple of recent builds. So, like, Charged Orb is virtually impossible to take right now. I don't think you'll take it in any build. It just doesn't do any damage. You get a ton of charge gen from your other spells and abilities now, and it's a very competitive point damage-wise. The same for Presence of Mind. I think both of those are dead utility nodes now, which sucks because I really like Charged Orb, and it's probably like one of the biggest quality of life talents when you're spec'd into like Orb Barrage, right?
Yeah, is it even dead? Is it dead still even on AoE? Like, I'm trying to think. Like if you spec
yeah.
like Bauble or something, is it really better?
You'll drop Bauble as well. So
oh yeah, the next
here
here, right? I don't have the Wohead's not showing where the actual gate is, so I was thinking the gate was one row sooner. I don't think it is.
So I posted in
oh yeah, here's the gate.
In our group chat. The top one, the first one I linked is AoE, and the second one, or Mythic Plus, the second one I linked is your pure single target build. And this is just based on pre-patch numbers, so you know what I mean? There might be things that are incorrect because hero talents aren't factored in. I'm still working on that stuff, but this is what we have so far, I think.
I'm actually surprised to see you drop Big Brain there.
Yeah, you just don't get enough clear casting in pre-patch, I think is the big driving point of that. I think it's possible Big Brain, we do keep it, you know what I mean, once we have the hero talents, and like we have Arcane Soul and Splinter Storm generating clear casting for us.
I wonder
if you think...
Go ahead.
You go ahead. You go,
no.
Degen.
Dibs. All right. And do you think that, so for people who aren't aware, Illuminated Thoughts is currently actually reducing your chance to proc clear casting by quite a bit? Do you think that if they fix that, that's going to become a competitive node?
I think so, yeah. But it's hard to say because in Dragonflight, Illuminated Thoughts is whatchamacallit, it's multiplicative, right? So it's only giving you 5% more of 1% chance to proc clear casting when you spend 100 mana, right? So it's like really crappy. The current bugged version of Illuminated Thoughts is such that you have an increased chance to proc clear casting when you're not spec'd into it. And it's about 15 to 20%. I think 20% is probably what I've seen most often with tests. I think they're going to invert that, and I think it's going to be a 10% chance to proc clear casting, an 8% chance, and then a 10% when you have Illuminated Thoughts, and that's pretty good. I it's hard for me to say exactly how good, and if that's as good as Static Cloud, which is like 8% in 5 target plus. You know what I mean? It's like a really potent AoE talent. So that would be the talent point that it's competing with, though, in my opinion.
Yeah, I was going to say, not to ruin the symmetricalness of the tree, but I wonder if there's opportunities to like combine these utility talents. Like Charged Orb could get combined with like Orb Barrage, for example, since you probably want them in similar scenarios. If like Charged Orb has issues where it's like not really a DPS increase, like I think there's like an easy opportunity there to combine it.
I think there's another opportunity too if they just baked in something like Arcane Cleave or Concentrated Power and freed up that Gate 1 point there. So that way when you leave Gate 1, not only are you spending the 8 points that every other spec in the game has to spend to leave Gate 1, but also you have that extra floating point that you can go back and get Charged Orb or Presence of Mind for. The damage loss for those points are significantly less than for what I have selected so far.
Yeah, I don't think with this version of the tree, like us having to make these choices, like dropping Charged Orb, or I have to drop a little bit of single target to pick up Reverberate, or whatever. You have to make those choices. That's fine. That's supposed to happen. It's a talent tree. We shouldn't get everything. I do think the gates themselves need a little bit of work because that second gate is so wide and it has like a lot of spread in what you might want for a particular build. So being able to free up a point or two from the first gate and bring those into the second or vice versa would be nice. Just a little bit more freedom in your pathing.
Yeah, I will say I really like what they did with the center of the tree though. Like having Surge feed into either two utility options, and then those feed into Touch, your Evo, Eureka, like very potent talents that get you to kind of an open choice for the capstone tier, right? Just the power of Eureka and Evo, you're always going to have access to Arcane Debilitation and Prodigious Savant. It's never going to be like a build where you might want something under a capstone tier, but you don't want the Gate 2 stuff leading to it.
On the flip side, you have these two capstones gated by these 2-point tax nodes, right? So the capstone itself has to be worth the expenditure to get down there, because if you go one way, you can't go the other, or at least not without dropping a capstone. So, like Lay Drinker probably needs a little bit of love to make it more competitive with high voltage. And what is it, Arcane Debilitation, whatever the stacking buff is called.
Yeah, I think it's actually kind of interesting. Aether is worth so much right now compared to any of those other points that you mentioned: Lay Drinker, Lay Sight, Prodigious, and Debilitation, that it just eclipses any kind of choice you really want to make there. Like, ultimately, your choice becomes, do I want to drop High Voltage and Orb Barrage to pick up Prodigious Savant or not? And because there's no incentive at all to drop Aether at the current level. Like, it's trucking.
Yeah, my next question was actually going to be that, like, how much of the power here is actually in the capstones? Because, like, once you're committed to, like, Aether, like, you're not really choosing between the capstones anymore because you've, like, invested too many points to go the other way, like, regardless of how good the capstone is. So,
yeah, like I said before, Aether, Harmony, Magi Spark, those are 100% locked in talents, so those 7 points are just unmovable. Bombardment is also incredibly strong, and I don't think anything else really competes with it that's left over either.
And I do think we have been talking a lot from like a spell slinger perspective, because Sun Fury is just incredibly boring for Arcane right now. I could see a world where we might lean a little bit more into Lay Sight for the for Sun Fury build, just to like capitalize on those burdens and The was it Arcane Soul? But right now it's looking like a spell slinger world.
I mean, honestly, the Sun Fury stuff isn't implemented, so I don't have any numerical comparison. But like in beta, I can hit pretty close to the same highs that I can hit with Spellslinger with Sun Fury. I think the power of missiles is kind of eclipsing some of the differences in the trees. Although splinters are ridiculous right now, that's for sure. They're probably doing the hero tree as a whole is probably doing a third of Arcane's damage, possibly a little bit more.
Are we still in the boat? Like, how much of Spellslinger's damage is inside its CDs? Because a large percentage of Sun Furies is, right? I'm wondering, does that create a scenario where even if Spellslinger is like numerically better, you still have options, or do you not see that happening?
I think you still have options.
I think Spellslinger is a little bit of like a flatter profile, but it's not like a night and day difference where it's gonna like make or break a fight based on your burst.
Okay, that's just what I was curious about, because like I guess that's like the easiest balance if you want to create two play styles and you want them to be balanced. Is you make one burstier and you make the other do more sim DPS, but yeah, if that's not where they are today.
Like Sun Fury does give you a little bit more burst. You have Arlo going out, which is around 5% of your damage during your burst window. You get the Arcane Soul on the back end, so you can kind of push out a little bit more. But I don't think it's enough to like justify the difference right now.
Resizing this.
So I linked something in chat for the sim. Yeah. So you can see kind of like what I'm talking about with the amount that Spellslinger is contributing to Arcane's damage. So that's just the splinters at the top. Adding to that, you also have Force of Will, which is the crit and crit damage multiplier. And the charge gen from Orb proc that aren't really factored in, obviously. But you get an idea of some of the other talents, like Dematerialize is it's a little lower in the sim than it normally is. Usually I see it at around 3.5%, but you get a general idea of where things are at there.
That's cool. 433 took from Porum. This what is this? This sim's doing a lot less damage. No, I just clicked Telomere's link in chat.
That's the pre-patch sim.
Okay. Oh,
so
yes,
pre-patch looks considerably different. You can tell, like, honestly, the blast to missile damage ratio tells a huge part of the story there. Flipping back between the two, like, Splinter generate quite a bit more CP.
Man, I cannot believe you're doing pre-patch work. It's the one thing I would never do. I've never done.
I have to write the guide for it, so.
Yeah, okay.
Well, Toe, you should scroll down and look at the APL real quick. It's gotten a little bit simpler.
Yeah.
If you ever looked at it,
I think this is the most simple the Arcane APL has ever been. Sorry, DJ.
Oh, that's a short APL.
If you looked at it before, it was like separate out into like your openers and your burns and all this, and now it's just one blob that says do the NP cycles.
Is that because you can't be bothered with free patch, or because this is actually the best way to play?
That's actually the best way to play. I tried to separate it. Like, I originally had it separated into cooldown section, AoE section, single target section, and it was a DPS loss to keep those logics separate. And I was like rewriting lines and stuff. And I'm like, fuck this. Okay. And putting it into one blob, and then immediately I bumped every profile's damage 1.5%. I'm like, okay, that's it. This is what it is now.
Oh, so the beta APL is like that too.
Yeah,
yeah. Same APL actually.
They're identical at the moment. There's no differences.
That makes me think hero talents have not done their job. Obviously, it's not done yet, right? But
so Arcane's complexity, a lot of that came, or the complexity of the APL, a lot of that came from Radiant Spark existing. Like, just its existence made you have to do these very sequential, scripted out burns. With that removal, the difference between your filler and your cooldowns is very negligible. Like, you're doing the same exact thing. You are consuming clear cast to spend Nether Precision. You're doing that the entire fight. That is your mantra. Which kind of sucks in a way. This is my opinion. I hate mini burns now because they do not feel like a cooldown. I literally press touch the Magi and then I pretend nothing else is happening. You don't have that setup. Like, big burn's still okay because you press surge, or you evo, you surge, you set up your smart or your touch, and you feel like you're going into a cooldown kinda. But after all that, you're just back to Nether Precision. With the mini burn, it's okay. Touch is coming off cooldown. Make sure I have my Nether Precision. Barrage, touch, back to spending. It's very boring. It does not feel impactful. It doesn't feel like a cooldown at all.
I'd really like it, I think, if they just changed a couple of things to help that along. So one, I think they should move the clear casting gain from Arcane Surge to Touch of the Magi instead. I also think that Energized Familiar should work off Touch of the Magi instead of Surge as well. I think those two changes would make Magi just feel a little bit less bare bones when you're doing that mini burn. Because right now, that's the worst part, right? The mini burn, the echo damage, it looks so much worse, and it's just naked, right? Without any kind of launch sequence or any kind of rotational complexity.
yeah,
Like, I'm fairly confident you could almost ignore your mini burns for like probably a 3% damage loss, ballparking it.
I would be surprised if it were that high.
yeah.
Like, honestly, it is a really weak damage window. And honestly, it would probably simplify the APL to some degree to pull that out, because then I don't have to worry about mana, saving any kind of mana for it.
Well, I was wondering how easy it was to change this. Where did you touch the Magi? Oh, understores.
Yeah, it's at the top of the rotation section.
Yeah. Never mind, I'm not doing this.
Live APL editing with Toe Grinder.
Yeah, as soon as
I
see a
streamed
variable, I'm like, yeah,
it.
no, we're not doing that right now. I don't have time for that.
Yeah, I think the mini burn dilemma is probably my biggest issue with Arcane right now. I do have some minor gripes with high voltage and harmony. There's rotations floating around. I think Pre put out a video on it of you can basically just send your missiles, consume with barrage. If you don't have CC, you just press AE, whatever, or charge orb. So you kind of like clip your harmony. You never really build it up to 20. So there's just like it makes harmony feel less impactful.
I have one more cursed bit of news actually in the APL there. So if you go to the rotation section, or sorry, to the pre-combat variables toe.
Oh no, we're simming.
I know you wanted to avoid that.
This should work, right? If I change Touch of the Magi and just say unbuff Arcane Surge is up.
Yeah. Oh yeah. That should just remove the mini burn.
This syntax is right. Buff.arcanesurge.up. Trying to find another example. Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, that looks good to me. Oh, you know what? No, you need to go down to the barrage line. So Control F, Touch of the Magi, dot ready. So you need to get rid of those or do something with them.
This one?
Because those will barrage when touch is up. Basically, I was having issues with the APL continuing to blast, and not barraging when it didn't have a nether precision. And so I put in this fail safe so when even if you don't get nether precision, you'll still fire off a barrage when touch is up.
Right. And then we're changing this to an and
Yeah, cooldown Arcane Surge up. Yep.
and then these
Or buff Arcane Surge up. You definitely want buff Arcane Surge up because that'll only work when Arcane Surge is ready.
Yeah, well, that's what we're trying to do, right? Like I'm just changing this condition to be, instead of being Touch of the Magi being ready, Touch of the Magi and Arcane Surge are ready. I think.
Yeah, but Arcane Surge won't be ready when you use Barrage, right? When touch is ready, because it happens sequentially. Yeah. You use Arcane Surge, put it on cooldown, and then touch. Yeah.
Buffed Arcane Surge or something. Right, sweet. This might be
and I would just add that to the line above it as well.
Do that.
Too late, we clicked.
Yeah, well, whatever. But anyways, AoE is now at 2 targets instead of 3. Because Blast was tuned down far enough that Arcane Explosion with like Static Cloud and stuff keeps up.
I'm done.
That's not much.
No, it's not much. Did you say I needed to add it to the line above?
Yeah, there's another barrage line. Yeah.
Am I just adding the exact same condition?
Yeah.
This
and buff Arcane Surge up, and that should do it. I think you added a open parenthesis. Oh no, you closed it. Okay, never mind.
I copied a clipboard.
Listening to Toad talk while watching the stream with the 10-second delay or whatever is very, very confusing.
That's funny. I have it covered up, the half of his screen that shows us. I have it covered up with the Discord window that shows us.
Yeah.
But yeah, 2 target AoE is pretty degenerate, especially for Arcane, because it makes you so much more mobile.
And melee.
Yeah, and melee, yep.
So 2 target, you stop blasting, or is it 2 target or 3 targets and up? You stop blasting.
2 targets and up.
2 targets. I hate build?
That is with the high voltage or barrage build, which is best in single target. That's better for any build. As long as you have arc and cleave, that's the key component.
If we did this right, it's a 7% loss. Maybe we're being pessimistic. Could also be wrong.
Yeah, maybe we were beating on Tottem for no reason, you know.
To be fair, this is.
But it could also be that it's.
I know we expected it to be lower, but like in the grand scheme of things.
Yeah, completely. Completely ignoring a cooldown window of being a 7% loss is probably not ideal.
Yeah, and keep in mind too, the APL is doing behavior around that window that we didn't account for, like mana conservation from the barrage line is designed around mini burn windows. So like there's definitely optimization to do.
All right, time to get it to a sub 4.
Yeah. We will now spend the next 3 hours optimizing the 0 mini burn rotation.
I love optimizing damage losses. It's all I do for fire.
Yeah.
If they're really practical, I like it. I like the sync in Kyrian Arcane. I like to trying to optimize that.
The desync or the sync?
No, sync, because at least whenever Kyrian Arcane first became a thing, desync was better.
Yeah.
I'm not doing
it was mildly though. I don't think anyone did it. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I liked the desync. It was kind of fun for me.
It's always cool having tight cooldown windows. Sometimes, like as a entertainment point, for a fight that you're already familiar with. But then you get into Razagath and you're like fucking stressing about your cooldowns at the same time that winds are going off and shit. And it gets a little less fun, I think, for a lot of people.
I skipped Razagath in season 1 because I was moving across the country. I did it the first time a couple weeks ago. Pure panic, man. Even though the fight's been completely nerfed, pure panic. I had no idea what was going on.
Yeah, it's got maybe one of the hardest phase 1s in an end boss. You're like...
It's fun, though.
You're like 250 wipes in that boss, and like 180 of them are in P1. That's a weird boss. Okay. Anything more on Arcane? Despite the fact that it feels like we haven't talked about much, we are at 50 minutes.
Yeah, no, I know. We have talked a lot of... Oh, it's worth noting, too, that now that we have some numbers, Time Anomaly, like 5% ahead of Inspired Intellect. It's not even close.
You hate to hear it. You hate to hear it.
Yeah, and with hero talents, that's probably going to be exasperated because of the value of clear casting for splinters and...
Right, Dave, just delete this node. Move Mass Barrier or Mass Invis here, and just delete this node.
Yo, I'd be down to have Mass Invis sometimes. That would be kind of cool.
Well, it's important for us to have our frustrating gameplay, you know?
Yeah.
It is part of the class fantasy, after all.
Yeah. I keep doing like dummy testing or whatever, and I'm like, it's not that bad, right? You know, I get these procs. Sometimes they're not great. Sometimes they're pretty good. Then I go do a raid boss or literally any actual content, and I just want to punch my monitor because I hate Time Anomaly so much.
Yeah. Delete this node and delete Shifting Power, Dave, or I will delete Mage Hub.
I'm pretty sure somewhere in the back end they have a script that checks for downtime in combat, and that's when they proc the major cooldown.
Yeah.
Kind of like how in M+, the quaking always goes out right as like the really bad damage overlap is coming on a fight or something, you know?
And everyone's stuck behind this pillar, the LOS to boss mechanic.
Yeah,
that one. Yeah.
Trying to think if there's any other points to mention here. I think a couple of minor points. So reactive barrier no longer works with mass barrier. That's a big kind of hit for the Spellslinger defensive talent.
Reactive barrier. Oh, this one.
So it's Spellslinger. Yeah, it's the middle node. So I think the mirror images is probably a bit more locked in than reactive now. Or they're at least more comparable for Arcane. I think like Frost was always going to use Phantasmal, but I think with reactive not working with mass anymore, it's just a little bit worse.
Do mirror images still not work properly in raids? Like they don't dissipate, I'm guessing.
It just depends on the mechanic. It's hit or miss. I don't run redupe and reabsorb, but like I know Cooney runs it all the time, and he swears by it. He says that it does proc a lot, and he has a weak aura tracking it. I'm planning on using it more aggressively. Yeah. I'm planning on using it more aggressively and only using the heal so that I can track it easily in logs. And just seeing what procs it and what doesn't in the future, and fuck it, it's just a class tree talent point. I'll take 2% more damage, I guess.
Yeah, I might try it this week. What week is it? Avarice? See what the crack is in there.
Yeah, I feel like it's one of those things where like we got it in Shadowlands pre-patch or in DF pre-patch in Shadowlands, and it like didn't work with anything. Or like, this talent's really fucking bad, and maybe it's just lived with that rap since.
I know a lot of Mythic Plusers swear by it, but you also get hit by a lot more random garbage in there.
You probably also have the opportunity for the aggro to actually work and them to die to like melee attacks and shit like that as well, right?
Yeah, if you're playing Arcane with a Demon Hunter.
Well, it depends, because according to the tooltip anyway, this doesn't work if they die. They have to dissipate to you getting hit. At least that's what the tooltip says.
The nice thing is the heal is entirely trackable and logged, so it should be really obvious what triggers these when they happen. The unfortunate part is the heal is probably the less valuable proc of the two. I think I'd rather have the CDR. Yeah. But I don't know if the CDR is easily trackable.
Yeah. 15% of your health inconsistently spread over 40 seconds is not it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I could see Phantasmal Image being really good if Redupe is valuable. You know what I mean? If it's proccing a lot, like you get an extra image, that's another 10 seconds CDR, right?
Yeah, so Mirror Image is then at like a 120 cooldown minus another, I guess, like 30 something from shifting power. Are you basically just press Mirror Image up? Oh.
Yeah. Also the priest ability too, right? You have the what is it called? Symbols, right?
The Symbols of Hope.
Yeah.
Yeah. I don't know what any other class spell is called. I just know like icons and press your thing.
Do what the healing note says, or else.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Do we want to talk about another spec? Or do we want to say that 56 minutes was enough? Doesn't feel like we
could keep it under an hour for once.
Did you say we should talk about fire for once?
I said we could keep it under an hour for once.
God, Arcane Dream and shambles.
I think a good thing to highlight for any Blizzard employees listening right now is Frostfire Bolt is absolutely horrible to play with as Frost and Fire. So as Fire, it has no minimum travel time. So like you can throw it out and it can take it can take longer than your GCD till it hits, which fucked up Hot Streak generation. And as Frost, it calculates its damage on cast instead of on hit like every other Frost spell for shatter reasons. So like you can do weird shit like if you have one Winter's Chill up, you can Frostfire Bolt into Ice Lance and shatter both spells, which is it doesn't even feel good. It literally feels bad to do that.
Yippee.
Other fire things, Dave, if you're listening, Hyperthermia and Sun King's Blessing are absolute shite together. So if you are in the middle of hardcasting your SKB Pyro and you proc your Hyperthermia from the Sun Fury combustion expiration, you will send the dry Pyro, not activate SKB, and then be stuck in Hyperthermia. Really not a fun interaction.
You can't enter combustion during Hyperthermia?
If you are hardcasting the Pyro for your Sun Kings, and you get the Hyperthermia from Sun Fury, it will still send the Pyro. You'll finish the hardcast, but you will not get the SKB buff.
Yes, the Sun Fury guy.
Yeah, so if Memory of Alar procs while you are casting, you will not get your SKB buff.
Yeah. It like immediately flags your Pyro as being instant cast and no longer hard castable at all. So like even though you're fucking 3 seconds deep on a Pyro cast, it doesn't care.
You get the combustion buff, but you don't get the increased Pyro damage. That's what you mean. You
will not get the combustion buff.
No.
Oh, okay.
Your SKB just fails to activate. You keep Fury of the Sun King buff, and it just doesn't activate. So at least you don't lose the buff, but like you can't start on your next Sun King, right? Incrementing. It's just janky.
Let's see, other fun fire things. So in the last tuning patch for fire, they kind of killed off Living Bomb in single target, which kind of pushes us towards the Scorch talents. So we have Heat Shimmer, Improved Scorch, or Scald. So Heat Shimmer is a 5% chance on Ignite ticks to give you an instant cast Scorch that will treat the target as an execute. I did a local implementation for this, and just consuming the buff on proc, you have about a 52% uptime on Improved Scorch with Heat Shimmer in single target. That number goes up if you have targets funneling. So it's an RNG maintenance buff.
Oh, my two favorite mechanics actually just mashed together.
It's like the worst way too. Like I think nothing's gonna feel worse than when your strong maintenance buff falls off and it's completely out of your control, right? Like Jesus Christ.
I will say this is completely numbers pulled out my ass. I believe Scald is still stronger than Improved Scorch. Scald is increasing it by 300%, so you're doing 400% damage, I believe. So it almost makes Scorch a button worth pressing.
Is that with Sun Fury and Unleashed Inferno?
Sorry, what do you mean?
Like whenever you're saying Scald is better, are you talking about like...
I'm just saying in general, Improved Scorch is actually a really negligible talent. Even currently here in Dragonflight, if you're doing a Lusted Execute, you should be dropping Improved Scorch. It's actually a DPS loss.
But what I mean is, Scald requires you to cast more Scorches. So the more things you have to do in your filler that aren't casting a filler spell would favor Improved Scorch over Scald, if you know what I mean. And right now, Fire does a lot out in its filler that isn't casting its filler spell. If you get me?
Yeah.
So I'm like, if you move towards like an Unleashed Inferno, like a non-Sun King's Blessing, non-Phoenix Flames build, you would cast more filler spells, which would make Scald relatively better.
I think just by default, Scald is better. Just the damage amp that you're getting from Improved Scorch doesn't justify the global that Scorch does, because it's 1/5 of a Fireball's damage. So you're literally only pressing it for that Improved Scorch debuff. So,
yeah, it sounds like there's a lot of opportunity cost one way or the other, right? And it's probably a numbers game. As far as like whether you want the more potent Scorch or Scorch buffing your Pyros, right? Because just being 1/5 of Fireball's cast isn't super relevant, because you don't want to cast Fireball either, right? You really want it to cover Pyros.
Yeah, that's my point. Is like Fire doesn't actually use its filler spell very often, so like the filler spell applying a buff, like the power between those things changes based on how much you're actually casting your filler. Yeah.
But with Heat Shimmer, that's expanded outside of just your execute, so it becomes another hot streak generator because it's always going to crit. And it's an instant cast with the increased damage. And you get a lot of Heat Shimmers.
Nice.
Another thing to touch on too that... Oh, go ahead.
No, you go. Mine was
I was just going to say another thing to touch on too. Sun Fury, they fixed the codex problem. That was something that we talked about the last time we got together. But basically, they made it a lingering buff when when the bird consumes your spheres. So that way you never actually net lose any % damage during your CDs. They also lowered it, so it's less impactful. So now it's only 1% per sphere. Which is kind of weird because, like, it feels like Sun Fury is just doing a lot less than Frostfire and Spellslinger for Arcane and Fire.
What did this do before? Because I remember the exceptional spell part, but...
Well, it did 2% per sphere, so it's a little bit higher, but also when you entered your cooldowns, as the bird used the exceptional spells from your spheres, you lost the damage buff, right? So for a little bit there, it was a damage gain to not take Codex, so that the bird never spent your spheres, and you just kept the % damage. But it's good that they fixed that, and hopefully they take a similar approach with Spellslinger and lower the splinter cap on targets from 250 to something more rational.
They also, in one of the recent tuning patches, they renamed Mana Addiction to Mana Cascade. And I do not know if this is intended or not, or what's going on. A, it does a lot less haste. It's like 0.5 per stack or something. B, when you exit your combustion or whatever, and you have all these stacks, instead of like neatly falling off as they should, they just like randomly start dropping off and going everywhere. Like, it's super weird behavior if you look at a log. So I don't know if that's bugged or if Mana Cascade is just cascading.
Yeah, it's funny too because they never fixed the tooltip in memory of Alar, so it still calls it Mana Addiction. I'm hoping that goes live so we can cancel Blizzard for shitposting about addiction.
I'm
pretty sure that's why they renamed it too. Yeah, I love the name. I thought it was great. It was one of those things that was like in line with the rest of the theme. Like, oh yeah, I'm gonna be a blood elf. I'm addicted to mana. You know what I mean?
Yeah. One thing I want to just, before we wrap up, bring it back to Arcane. They like set out one of their goals was like simplify Arcane, and people love telling me in the YouTube comments that it's really complicated and needs this simplification. So how do you feel like Arcane plays now compared to in the War Within and like the complexity department for them? If you want to start.
It has no complexity at all. It's probably the simplest
you would say that
spec in WoW after this. Yeah, true. I mean, the thing is right. So I have the luxury of being the primary theory crafter for Arcane, so all the complicated problems for Arcane I've gotten to solve, right? So when it comes to like Radiant Spark, Sir Grand solved some of the problems going into Dragonflight. I solved some of the problems that came up during Dragonflight. But from a player perspective, you just followed the script, right? There wasn't really a whole lot of variance in the spec. I think in general, the script still made it interesting to play, right? You still had to like learn what was counterintuitive about it. And I regularly fielded questions from players who were like, I don't get it why it's like this, and I need to know why, There is no why anymore. There's no complex problem to solve. I think some people will really enjoy that. You know what I mean? I think some people will get in there and they'll be like, okay, the spec is intuitive now. It's very easy flowing. But I think for like any player that is used to current Arcane or used to current Mage specs in general, they're gonna find it very boring and kind of monotonous compared to like Frost and Fire, which have a little bit more going on under the hood.
Yeah, I said on Alter Time the other day, like, I think CD-based specs that have hard casts, like, that's the thing that new people struggle with. It's not like the complexity of the rotation. It's that style of play is really easy to punish people who don't know what's going on. Like, yeah, so it feels like the wrong fix, just like making the rotation simpler, but it is what it is, I suppose.
I think the biggest issue is they just went too far with it. I think the goal was, what they stated the goal was, right, was having opt-in complexity. So to me, that means that you have competing builds, one of them relatively simple, one of them has some complexity. The more complex one is going to generally perform a little bit better, right? That's usually the mantra you go into, right? So that your skill floor and ceiling are sufficiently distant from one another so that good players still feel like they're good players. Right now in my pre-patch sim, I think the variance is like 23%. So there is no good Arcane players. There are lucky Arcane players, and that's all it's going to be from now on. And I think they just went too far with separating skill and performance for Arcane.
I think from the outset they were kind of at a disadvantage with this whole mission goal of make Arcane less complex, because difficulty is always subjective. I found Arcane very easy in its current version. I also find fire very easy in its current version, but a lot of people struggle with the APM or the scripted memorization of whatever. Like everyone's going to consider different things complex or difficult. And I think what they did for Arcane is they kind of took it out of the player's hands. So now it's a proc-based spec. It's semi-reactive. It's not as reactive as like Frost or Fire, but there's more going on. Like you have more ways to consume nether precision. You have more procs from your missiles. You can generate more clear casting proc or arcane charges. So like there's more of these little things, but they took away the big payoff for all these little things. And I go ahead, Porum.
No, it's all right. I didn't mean to interrupt.
No, I just think that they kind of overstepped it, and they took the agency away from the player. So now there's no learning. There's only procking.
I think a lot of those little things too that are built off of clear casting now, they also went out of their way to make them uninteresting. Like the nether precision loop for Arcane was like kind of bolted on in Dragonflight to sustain some variance in your casting because they didn't want things to be BFA or Shadowlands, right? Where you did nothing but spam missiles or spam blast. And that worked for Arcane in Dragonflight because you had kind of two segments of the rotation, right? You had your cooldown nuclear codes, and then you had your filler beyond that. Now it's kind of just all filler, like you said before, right? You have Evo, Surge, Touch. That's 2 GCDs essentially, right? That's barely 2 cast of time in your rotation every 80 seconds or so. And yeah, the biggest issue too is that nether precision is so sequential in how it works that you're not really like there's no mastery between the clear casting nether precision loop. There's no player execution that's going to change from like what one player does and what another player does based on their situation, right? They're just always going to do the same fucking thing. It's really simple. Really simple.
Like we spent a lot of time in Dragonflight calling fire orange frost, right? Because it's like the semi-uptime spec. If you abstract it just a tiny, tiny bit, Arcane is now purple frost. Instead of your flurry combos, you have your MP combos. So clear cast, missile, blast, barrage. Every time you have a flurry combo. That's what they've built. You are basically back to a 3-button frost rotation.
Yeah. Part of that was also the damage profiles, which does seem... I just opened the report. Like, Arcane still seems to do good burst damage.
Yeah, it's definitely still a burst spec. Thank God. A big part of that is them baking in Siphon Storm, doing profiles without Evo that it flattens considerably. So I'm glad
really that they with hero talents. Actually, the hero talents flatten even Bellslinger, but it doesn't. It makes it even more CD based.
You would think that, but the fact that Surge doubles your Splinter generation while it's up is a big driver in that, right? Because that also fueled more clear casting and folds into itself.
Yeah.
Yeah, like you are still a bursty spec. A lot of that is baked in as passive. So when I press Surge now, I don't feel like I'm entering a cooldown window. I feel like I'm just bloop, now I do more damage, 35%. Let's go. And I feel like with the loss of the scripted rotation, Arcane has kind of lost its identity between the 3 mage specs. Like Frost was always the simple procky. Fire was the I have ADHD and just did a couple of concertos. And Arcane was like the very methodical, plan out to the fight timings, follow the scripted rotation. And I like that separation, and I think the homogenization of the 3 specs is kind of a really bad design philosophy.
Yeah. I think Fire is moving away a bit. We'll see if what Unleashed Inferno happens. Or what happens with it. But
yeah, I'd say I'm really happy with the Sun Fury Frostfire dichotomy for fire and how that's played out. I think when it comes to the War Within, the rework, and the hero talents, I think fire is kind of a big winner out of the Mage spec.
Fire is a massive winner.
When is it?
Speaking of which, oh yeah,
when is it not? To be fair, 10.1.5, right? We definitely, I think, correctly identified. Most of us, at least. I was a little bit pessimistic about Arcane at the time, but I think people correctly identified fire kind of lost in the 10.1.5 rework, but I think War Within it's definitely coming out ahead.
No, fire always.
That's like that was the this expansion rework, right?
Yeah, that was the Dragonflight rework.
Oh, you think fire lost in that? Oh, I didn't think it did.
Fire won temporarily.
It might have,
until they nerfed Flame Strike, right?
Yeah, it might have won less than the other specs.
Yeah, I think that's really what we were talking about then. Yeah. But I think right now it's like clearly, I would say Frost is kind of losing right now. I don't think there's anything positive. I think for Arcane there's some positive, especially. I think for Arcane, whether you see Arcane as positive or negative is really going to be in the eye of the beholder on the War Within rework. If you thought Arcane was complex and unapproachable before, you're going to really, I think, like what Arcane is now. If you thought it was fine and you liked that complexity and that exercise you had over your performance, you're probably not going to like Arcane as much now. But Frost, I think every Frost mage is down about Frost and the War Within.
Yeah, I could probably do with its own episode. I think there's an issue with Frost where like it's had an identity crisis for like multiple expansions now. Like there's been a lot of different Frost builds, maybe over the last 3 or 4 expansions that like you're playing a different spec. And it's kind of like what is Frost? What is it like supposed to be? Because like there's probably a lot of people that don't like current Frost. There's probably a lot of people that do. Those people that like it are probably very different than the people who liked previous Frost, like Exopropulsion Frost, who are probably different from the people who liked Night-Old Frost. Probably different from the people who liked Old Year Frost. You know, it's like I don't know what they're doing with that spec, and it has no. I feel like
Glacial Spike is the big divide right now. You have the people that really, really enjoy Glacial Spike. Hi, that's me. And then you have the people that miss their Frostbolt Shatter combo, Wombo combo, 1, 2, 3, 3. And I think Blizzard is just struggling to try and find the happy medium between those two. And for some reason, their solution to it was to bring back Deathborn, which might be the most insane design decision I have ever read from a Blizzard developer.
What do you mean? I've seen people say that's a good thing.
I think we should save this for its own episode. I'll do like an entire episode of why we don't like Frost.
Can we bring Glad on as a special guest?
I could. No, but I do think it would be worth an episode on its own. Yeah. Okay, we're an hour and 20 minutes in. Do you want to call it here? Any clues?
Yeah, I think we're good.
Okay. Thank you all very much for watching. I'm Toe Grinder. You're probably watching this on my YouTube channel if you're not watching it on the stream. If you're not, my YouTube channel is Toe Grinder, how you think it's spelled. So go check that out. Any plugs or anything you just want to say?
Bye.
Okay. Delete Deathborn.
Yeah,
Goodbye.
Deathborn. Okay. Thank you very much for watching, everybody. Bye.